So let's say there's over 500,000 people coming into Australia every year. They're saying that's like having a whole Canberra come into Australia. Now, what's also interesting about that is they're not all skilled workers. That of that cohort, only 12% are skilled workers. The rest are family members. 62,000 extra homes would have to be needed just to meet supply with the increased population. 62,000. Labor can't even build one. It's not a laughing matter, Lloyd. It's not. So the Liberal Party's falling apart a little bit. We've got two main members of the coalition not supportive of the Liberal Party policy. You ought to be voting for those who have some sort of energy policy in place that's not about green energy, and someone who is supportive of not bringing in flipping 500,000 people here a year. It's just like ridiculous. If you do nothing else at the next federal election, at least vote for someone who's going to help you in your back pocket. Why is this important when it comes to your wealth? Well, I'm Lloyd James Ross, seven-figure investor and entrepreneur, and I've helped thousands of business owners and professionals turn financial stress into success. If you're stuck in old money habits, overwhelmed by investing, or unsure where to start, this is for you. I'll give you the mindset and strategies to take control, grow your wealth, and achieve financial freedom. It's time to make your money work for you. Is mass immigration collapsing the Australian property market? How has this got to do with wealth? Well, everything, particularly if you live in Australia. Not only is immigration making property unaffordable, many think that if it stops, it could collapse the Australian property market. Now, in this episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening with mass immigration, how it's impacting your everyday financial life, why it's a problem in all areas, and will it stop and what impact will that have? Not just on your lifestyle, but certainly on the Australian property market, which includes your home and property investments. So is mass immigration collapsing the Australian property market? No, it's actually the opposite. Mass immigration is pumping the property market. It's pumping it to levels that we've not seen since the late 1800s, when we had our last immigration-led property bubble. And so I would say mass immigration is pumping the Australian property market, not collapsing it. However, if and when, I should say, mass immigration falls away, which at some point it probably will, and I'll explain with some data points here why I think that will happen, then we don't have all this orchestrated demand. Now, if we don't have orchestrated man-made demand, then we are going to see a massive shift in the growth of Australian property compared to where we've just come from. Because what's happening is we're anchored to this 65% growth in 3 or 4 years, which is gnarly. It's unusual. It's well above the mean returns for property, even at a nominal rate when we include inflation. It's still high. And what that means is the future returns are going to be much lower, particularly if it has to come and revert back to the mean or the average. It will have to have some sort of slump to get back to the average of even 7% a year. Now, there's two things happening, and you'll say this to me in the comments, so I may as well address it now. There are two things happening with prices in Australia. One is driven by inflation. The other one is driven by real returns, okay? So part of the return equation and the total return of a property asset or a company or shares, whatever it might be, is two parts. One is the inflation, which is running at about 2.8% a year, if you believe the core inflation data. And the rest of it is real returns. Actual returns driven by growth in the asset based on the sustainable demand and supply of the asset. And also the income, okay, at a discount rate. So with that all said, what is happening right now with immigration? How's this impacting your finances? Well, as I said, it's pumping the Australian property market up. However, it's also causing some problems in the employment sector, and it's causing huge amounts of inflation. All right. So even if property is going up, if inflation is also running with it and wage growth is not, then because of the supply of labor, then we're going to have a huge stagflation problem, which is probably what's happening right now in North America too, okay? Now, stagflation, the last time it happened was in the late 60s. I think from 1966 to in the 70s, stagflation was very rampant. And what happens with stagflation is that when you drop rates, growth doesn't appear, but inflation goes up. And so what happens with this stagflation is you get high unemployment and high inflation. It's a terrible spot to be. And last time it happened, Paul Volcker, who was the Fed chair in America back then, he had to increase interest rates to 18% to beat this stagflation and break it. Now, when that happened, it collapsed the share market. It collapsed the property market. Everything collapsed. And this is when Warren Buffett was buying up all these incredibly cheap companies. He and Charlie Munger were spending a lot of money buying up cheap companies. They bought a lot of good businesses back then for cheap. Now, just as a signal, Warren Buffett's got about $370 billion in T-bills right now. So perhaps he might think that stagflation is upon us already. But in Australia, what's really not making a huge... What's preventing stagflation really setting in is this mass immigration. So they're really trying to avoid a recession here by printing more people. It's just brutal, right? So let's check it out, right? Here's what I want to know. Here's what I want you to know. There's record high net overseas migration, okay? So there's, I think to the tune of 528,000 new arrivals. So if you think about the size of that, and the numbers change from source to source, but this is from the Daily Telegraph, and it's MSM's mainstream media, so take it with a grain of salt. It's just broad figures. It's just estimated figures. So let's say there's over 500,000 people coming into Australia every year. That's like, they're saying that's like having a whole Canberra come into Australia. Now, what's also interesting about that is they're not all skilled workers. In fact, I read a statistic yesterday that of that cohort, only 12% are skilled workers. The rest are family members. So we're bringing in non-productive labor at the same, at a much higher rate than we're bringing in productive labor. So why is that important? Here's why. There were only 148,000 new dwellings built. So we're bringing in, I mean, again, the family unit can fit in there. So if you look at the data, 500,000 into 148,000, maybe enough, maybe. But it's certainly not going to alleviate the pressure on the housing market by any stretch, okay? So it says here, by the Daily Telegraph as well, 62,000 extra homes would have to be needed just to meet supply with the increased population. 62,000! Labor can't even build one. It's not a laughing matter, Lloyd. It's not. 62,000. So I see, again, and you're probably right in the comments, I don't see, with the current immigration levels, the property market cooling. I don't see it collapsing yet. However, when it comes off the ball, I do see it adjusting. Okay, so let's look at that. The next part is this. This is an interesting stat. So we have a shortfall in dwellings. We then have, I wanted to touch on this. We have the jobs. So there's about, last time I checked, I don't have the exact source here, and I'm using sources now because you guys in the comments are flipping unrelenting. You're just like, we need sources. I'm trying to give you the sources from the data. But I did read with the employment, I'm pretty sure it's about 53,000 public sector jobs available. And let's call it at 12% of 500, there's not quite enough jobs to fill with the immigration that's coming in. Certainly if you add in a spouse, we're looking at 250,000 entrants a year and 50,000 market jobs. So we're like 5 times too many people to each job. So what we're doing too when we're immigrating all these people is not only exacerbating rentals and property values to unreasonable levels, but we're also creating unemployment instantly. And what we're doing then is they have to go on welfare if there's any social security they qualify for. And then all of a sudden the taxpayer, all of us who are already here, are servicing this burden or this anchor of non-productive labor. And it's making Australia a very unproductive place, which is why our GDP per capita has gone down over the last 7 quarters. We've been in a quiet recession for 7 quarters, almost 2 full years. So that's what's causing this, right? So, here we go. Yes. Oh, my mistake. So 37,500 job vacancies, not even 53,000. It's actually less. Just quickly, if you're ready to take control of your finances but feel stuck on where to start, I have a solution. My book, Money Buys Happiness, simplifies investing and wealth building with practical steps to help you achieve financial peace. Get your copy via the link in the show notes and let's get your money working for you. Now back to the episode. Why is this important when it comes to your wealth? And what do I think this is happening? Well, it seems to be the reason why this is happening is because Labor is effectively importing voters. It seems to be because they're moving into specific electoral areas that are Labor voting areas. And I'm not the first person to mention this. If you're hanging out enough on X, you'll find it. Now, they will obviously deny that, but it's a bit of a chapter taken out of the Democratic Party's playbook, the last federal election in the United States. And if that's the case, then we may see a long run of Labor, in which case you're probably going to see mass immigration consistently come into Australia for a few years, in which case we will not see a collapse in the property market. We just won't. Not in the short term. However, I did notice recently that the polls for One Nation have grown by, I think, 12% now of the certainly the popular vote in the polls, are now moving towards One Nation. Here's why. And even recently, the one of the members of the coalition, what's his name, Andrew? He recently just went against net zero, which is a major policy of the Liberal Party and coalition, and he's now backtracking. And same with the other lady, Jacinta. So we've got two main members of the coalition not supportive of the Liberal Party policy. So the Liberal Party is falling apart a little bit with Susan Lay's leadership. And so what we may see is a new coalition, perhaps with One Nation, or a shift in the Liberal leadership and a spill. And if they proceed to move forward with effective policy for Australian people, it would be this. One, net zero scrap so we can improve our energy costs here, which brings inflation down, which helps your back pocket. Two, stopping mass immigration, dropping the immigration numbers to a sustainable level of 130,000 a year instead of 550, whatever it might be. And Pauline Hanson's spearheading that too. And if they do that and they succeed over a number of years, we will see a flattening of the property sector. And I just don't think we'll see these nosebleed prices again. And it could be a long, long time, which is why I ain't touching the property market, not one bit. Like once this artificial demand dries up, look, if the Australian people are Aussies, we don't march. We're just not marchers. But the other day, when was it, 13th of September, everyone's marching with the Australian flag against mass immigration. And the mainstream media is like, oh, it's to do with anti-racist and blah, blah. No, it's because you're bringing in too many flippant people. And so for Australians to get out of their house and march, which I flippant go, it's amazing. So it's really annoying. This mass immigration issue is now hurting the Australian people in a big way. So they're marching against it. So do you think that long-term Labor can keep up with this mass immigration strategy? Do you think? Or do you think the people will revolt? I think at some point in the future, it has to stop. Either it stops because there's a leadership spill and the people voted in, or Labor gets in because of this flipping voters they're importing, and the people just revolt, and we start to see real unrest, civil unrest. And that could take many years, of course, too. But I guess my point I'm trying to make is the artificial demand can't go on forever. You cannot bring in 500,000 people, let's say even of which, 60 or 70,000 are skilled, and you can't bring them into a certain supply of jobs. You just can't. Like, there has to be way more jobs than what we're bringing in people, and right now there's not. And the welfare you can't keep relying on that forever, because at some point we'll just become so unproductive. Our GDP growth will just be negative quarter. We'll have all these overpriced houses. No one's going to have as many jobs. Wage growth is going to be stagnant. And I mean, it's not going to be a pleasant place to live. So I just don't think the Australian people are going to put up with that forever. So one way or another, either the leadership sorts it out, or the market and the people's power will sort it out. But at some point, this mass immigration, by the way, pound for pound, population growth, population size, for size, we're bringing in the most in the world. So I think it will stop, and that will have a massive, massive effect on the property sector. Supply is constrained, but as supply comes online later too, we'll see a flattening out. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw over the next year or two, property prices continue to rise. Wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And then I wouldn't be surprised if there's a shift in immigration policy. We see it flatlining for over a decade, if not falling. Like, you're seeing at the minute what's happening in the United States. The reason why they're also engaged in a massive property slump is because they are literally, people are leaving the country because there's a lot of illegal immigrants in the country, and they're getting removed by ICE. So you're actually removing and dropping the population, or they're not immigrating as many. Net immigration is lower. And so they're seeing a drop, same as in Canada. They're seeing a drop in the property sector. And what's interesting in Canada is they're seeing a drop in the property sector while they're still immigrating. So by and large, we may not even need to see a drop in immigration, a drastic drop in immigration, to see the property market flatline, truly. We might even if labor starts to go, actually, we can't keep doing this, they may be the ones to stop it. But what I'm trying to impart here in this wonderful episode is it will come to a stop. The music will stop. We don't know what it's going to stop it, but once it does stop, I just would not like to be the person holding a $4 million property, a $4 million two-better, or whatever it might be, three-better, with $3.5 million of debt. I just wouldn't want to be holding that one. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So if you're in a position with your property where you're negatively geared and you're making negative cash flow from it every month, and if you had to, I've seen this happen before. I saw this happening in the mining, when the mining boom was on in 2010. There was obviously high yields in mining towns like Moranbah and Emerald and these different places in North Queensland here in Australia. And I saw the yields, like they were very high. And it was obvious that the demand was driven by mining employees moving to the area. Now, when these people bought those properties because of the growth, etc., the mining sector fell away and they had to hold those properties in negative equity. And certainly, a negative equity means that the house is worth less than what you own it. And then they had to hold the property with negative cash flow for like sometimes 12 to 15 years, some of them. Some of them are only just coming back now. And that was in 2010. What's it? Yes, almost 15 years. And so that's fine if you're going to be a long-term holder of property, which you should be. But can you sustain negative cash flow losses for 15 years? Like that's going to grind away at you. So I guess it's like buyer beware. We're at the height of this immigration-led property bubble. Immigration itself is causing the bubble, and at some point it's going to stop, which means the artificial demand will stop, which means the growth won't be the same, which means buyer beware, right? Now, of course, out there are people in the property industry, and by all accounts, I understand why they're spruiking it. I get it. They have to. Like, why would you be in a property business and not believe in property? I totally get it. But even they would see too now that it's like, it's getting a bit crazy, right? So this will have an impact in the short term on inflation here. It'll have a short-term impact on house price growth. But long term, I see hopefully an alleviation of the inflation problem and an alleviation of the house price crisis we're having. And all it's going to take is a spill in leadership and some shifts to policy in energy and a shift in policy of immigration. They're the two big things that if they change federally, it'll help your back pocket. So if you're struggling, you ought to be voting for those who have some sort of energy policy in place that's not about green energy, and someone who is supportive of not bringing in flipping half a million people here a year. It's just like ridiculous. So if you do nothing else at the next federal election, at least vote for someone who's going to help you in your back pocket. All right. So I hope that makes sense. I just want to share some stats here about what is happening with immigration, how it's impacting property prices, good, bad, or indifferent, and of course explain to you how that could possibly change. And when it does change, what it's going to do to asset values and hopefully inflation. All right. Hope that has been of value to you. Hit the subscribe button, share this with a friend. I'll see you in the comments. Come slay me. And if you want to add any data to this or throw your hat in the ring below in the comments, please feel free to do it. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Money Grows on Trees. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if you're serious about building wealth, make sure to check out the links in the show notes and follow me on all social media platforms at Lloyd James Ross for more. See you in the next episode.